Recently received a DM from this girl who watched one of my videos where I was talking about how to know whether you're on the right path or not in terms of your career or just in general, like what you want to do with your life. She said that she doesn't find a lot of content from Muslim women on this topic, whereas a lot of men do post about it. So I want to use my platform to share sort of my learnings in the career that I've had so far. And what I want to start off talking about is the concept of being honest with yourself. Even though that doesn't sound like career advice, it is probably the most important career advice you'll ever get. You have to be honest with yourself. You have to know yourself. You have to know your strengths. You have to know your weaknesses. You have to know what you're passionate about. You have to know what drives you. Because to be successful, you need to be, one, naturally talented at the thing that you're doing. And number two, you have to be willing to put in the hard work to push it forward. Without one or the other, it is going to be a lot harder, especially if you're in like the realm of entrepreneurship. So it actually all starts from honesty, because most people go wrong at that very first stage where they make decisions not based on who they are and what they care about, but more so their image, how they're perceived, what their family thinks, what their community thinks, all the ingrained biases that they have. Unfortunately, that's how some of us make the decision of where we want to go and what we want to do. Some people also just chase money and titles, and that's also incorrect. And I can say that because I did the exact same mistake. I was the eldest daughter, and that meant that I did not have any guidance. So I looked to the people around me at the time, and they were all going into accounting. So that's sort of the direction that they pushed me in. And I was like, okay, bet, I'm going to do it. So in grade 10, I had decided I was going to get into the accounting and finance program at Waterloo. Because to me, what I cared about most was having an education from the most prestigious school and being in a challenging program so that I could then prove my worth. Did I have any interest in accounting? Absolutely not. Was I good at it? Absolutely not. I'm like the opposite of what it takes to be in accounting. It's just like I didn't know myself enough to know that, but I thought that I wanted to be a finance girl and I wanted that image and I wanted that kind of money, and it was all for the wrong reasons. So I eventually applied and I got in. And after I got in, I didn't even care to see what the other universities offered. Waterloo was my first choice and I got in, and that was the end of that. And I had classmates that also got into like pretty prestigious schools, but they chose the less prestigious ones because of the community in that school, because of like their living experience that they were going to have, the kind of spirit that school had. And at that time, I thought they were insane. But in fact, they were not insane. They were very smart. They were not basing their decision off of all the wrong things like I was. Because to me, the most important thing was being impressive. And so I started university, and on the first day, like during orientation, they brought in like this Olympic speaker, and she looked at us and said that you will fail. I remember hearing those words and scoffing at the fact that I was never going to fail, because in my head, if I worked hard enough, there was no option to fail. And another thing is that I didn't have a plan B. I only had plan A because I didn't give myself a choice but to succeed at plan A. That was the only option. That was the only thing I was going to do. I was so dead set on it. So yes, it was part of my personality of being so stubborn that kind of like contributed to the next 5 years that I was about to have in hell. Up until that point, I had been the smart kid in school. It was never hard for me to get good grades. I just thought that if I put in the effort here, the same thing would happen. However, because I was in a place and in a program that was so misaligned with who I was destined to struggle. And the consequences of my actions and the way I thought hit me like a train, to say the least. I failed so many times and on so many occasions, and it was one failure after the other. And after first year, I actually got kicked out of the program because I didn't meet the grade requirement to stay in. But again, I had sold myself a lie, and I wasn't going to quit, and I was going to achieve it no matter what. So I petitioned, and I wrote the university a letter about why I should still stay in my program and whatnot, and why I couldn't get the grades. And it got accepted, and I got another chance. And this time I held on even tighter to all of those things. Like, this is who I am, and this is what I want to do, and I just have to work even harder. And so you would never catch me outside of a study room. That's where I spent all my days, and I was driven by fear in all of this. And I studied twice as hard than my peers, but despite that, nothing was registering in my brain. I was still unable to grasp the concepts. It was still just as difficult. And at the end of that next semester, after I had just got in, I was again kicked out of the program. I was kicked out of the program for a second time. But given the audacity that I clearly had, I petitioned again. And take in, getting your first petition accepted is almost a miracle. It's a rigorous process. So many people review the application. It's not easy to get your petition accepted. And I had that first one accepted. So here I was going in for a second one because, again, I was so stubborn and so set on this being the path that I couldn't see any other way forward. And I guess I'm really good at persuasion because they accepted it. And I was let back in. This was like my third chance to like get it right. Because the first time I failed, petition, got back in, then failed, then petition, then got back in. What? And when you petition, your grades on your transcript just become like an NCR. So I technically had no grades. But because my mindset is like everything works out for me, it does work out for me. Because during that semester, I was also applying for co-op because it's a mandatory part of my program. And I was going in as a candidate with absolutely no grades on her transcript and no work experience to show for anything. And alhamdulillah, I ended up landing a really good position in my actual field. So yeah, that was crazy. But anyways, now we're at the stage where I've gotten back in for a second time. So it was at this point where the wheels started turning in my head and I was like, something is wrong. I was finally at the point of acknowledging that maybe I'm not meant to be on this path. And that in and of itself sent me into a whole spiral because I had convinced myself since I was 15 that this is what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be. So I was going through a full-on identity crisis because if I wasn't pursuing my CPA or my accounting degree, what was I supposed to be doing? What was my path? For so long, I had told myself this story. So how could I just leave it? And secondly, if I did try to even pursue the path of something else, then that would mean that I had failed at this. Technically, in my mind, I hadn't failed because I was still trying. I was still on the path to pursuing it. So I hadn't failed just yet. And I knew I just had like this regret in my head, like everyone could do it. Why couldn't I? So anyways, all of that was just going on in my head. I remember that was the first time I ever went to like a guidance counselor and just like cried in her office about all of it. And she just looked at me weird. And I was like, okay, this was horrible. Never doing that again. But I was a wreck. I didn't know what to do. And lo and behold, once again, I did not make it. Guys, you don't know how many years it took for me to be okay with vocalizing this story. Because back when it was my reality and I was quote unquote failing, I could not talk about it. I could not even share it. In the beginning, I barely even told my parents what I was going through. It was only when I had gotten back into the program the first time that I even told them that I was kicked out. The pressure that I placed on myself was absolutely unreal. And it was a lonely journey. Not a lot of people even knew what I was going through, but I was going through all of it. So yeah, once again, I was kicked out. This is now the third time I have been kicked out. And this was the breaking point. I think I finally learned the lesson that Allah was trying to teach me through all of this. I put aside the image. I put aside the ego. I put aside the vision that I had, that I thought I had to be. I started being honest with myself. I knew that this is not where my strengths lied. I knew that I wasn't incompetent, but I was just in the wrong place. And what's crazy is that all the time before this, I would always just pray for the thing that I wanted. Like, oh Allah, grant me to complete this program. Oh Allah, this is what I want. This is what I want. That's it. I was too afraid to ask for what's best for me because I was afraid that it wasn't the thing that I wanted. So I didn't even ask. I wasn't in a position of asking. But for the first time, after the third time that I had failed, I asked Allah for what was best for me because I was so ready to move on and I was so ready to do better and to just get rid of all the biases that I had in my head about what success looks like. I had to redefine all of that and relearn everything. I started applying to other universities. And I remember when I got the acceptances to those universities and programs, there was so much grief that I went through in that process because at that stage, in third year, receiving those acceptances, I couldn't help but think about that girl that was so excited and she couldn't wait for the future in grade 12 when she got it and the happiness that I felt versus the grief and sadness and pain that I felt receiving them now. But I did it because I felt that I had to move on. However, I also petitioned again for that same program just so that the door wasn't closed entirely. Who knows? Like I just did it because I just wanted to tie my camel in all regards. I applied to other schools, I petitioned again, and I just prayed for what was best for me this time. And I remember so vividly, I was on co-op when I received the email in terms of like the response to my petition. And before I opened it, I just made a dua that it wasn't accepted. So that way I was freed from this entire experience and I could just move on with my life and accept that I did everything I could and that's it. But lo and behold, Allah's will, it was accepted for a third time. I write some really good persuasive essays, clearly. If you guys need help, just hit me up. This doesn't happen. This is unheard of. This is all just Allah's will and divine plan. Why? I was so shocked and I was so I don't know, like I was praying that I didn't get in. And despite even getting that email that my petition worked, I was still ready to move on and leave. I didn't want to go back. And so that night I went home and I told my dad everything that I was going through and just what happened with the petition. And he sat me down and he used this analogy of somebody digging a well. And he's like, look, this person is digging a well and they keep digging and digging and digging. And they don't know when the water's going to come, but they continue on until they reach the end of the well. Now imagine if this person doesn't reach the end of the well and then they go and dig another well. And now they have to put in the same amount of effort, but they still don't reach the water. So he said to me, you don't know when the water's going to come, but it's there. It's going to come. And something about what he said and just my own personality about like not knowing when to quit, I decided to continue on in the program. But this time I was a completely different person. I was not the same girl who was chasing titles, who was chasing the prestige. I was not chasing the image anymore. I had acknowledged the truth about my situation and who I was. And on top of that, now I was determined to use the remaining of my university experience to engage in the things that made me happy and the things that I was interested in. I took electives that I was interested in that had to do with user experience, user design. I started a business because my heart was always in entrepreneurship. And I entered that business into a pitch competition and I ended up winning first place and getting $5,000. And also placing as a finalist for another competition, which was worth $15,000. And these were at a really grand scale and they got a lot of attention. Other people in my program were like, oh my God, we saw you on the news for my business, which was featured on the news twice. I was literally invited on podcasts that were hosted by my program because they wanted me to talk about my success in this program and everything that it helped me achieve now. And this is what it was all for, something I don't even look at anymore. And to top it all off, my grades were really good that year. For some reason, I figured out accounting, literally got 90s on my midterms. And it all just fell into place. I got back the thing I wanted so desperately, better than ever before, when I let it go. I let it go and it came back to me in a much more beautiful form. Because I learned my lesson. Because I learned to trust Allah. To let go of my own ego and pride and to put that aside, to want what's best for me. And to ask Allah for what's best for me. That was the craziest and hardest journey that I went through. There were lows, guys. I had so many low moments. Sometimes it seemed easier to just end it all than to do that exam, knowing that I'm going to fail. But alhamdulillah, it was my faith that got me through it. And it was also having my sisters. And I remember coming home one day and painting with them and feeling happy. Something I hadn't felt in a really long time when I was in school. And I realized that we have multiple realities. And if we focus in on the reality where we're failing and when we're not doing well, we are going to fall into despair. But because I had the ability to come home and do something that I loved with my sisters, it just like jerked me out to realize the bigger picture of it all, that my failures in school did not define me. Because there were so many parts to me that were beautiful and that were worth living for and that made me who I was. So it was a journey of self-worth. It was a journey of misalignment and coming back to alignment. It was a journey of trying to take control of something that was never in my control. And it wasn't easy, but alhamdulillah, I came out of it so beautifully and so unscathed, no matter what I went through. And alhamdulillah, I have healed from that time because it's been a while. And that's the only reason why I can even share this message. And yeah. So if you liked this story time, make sure to like, share, subscribe. I might share another story time on how I got over the grief of not becoming the person that I had always wanted to be.